Along with having Corey in the car, the Oklahoma City detectives also have Corey's belongings that were taken from his brown station wagon he was driving. They'll be analyzed by a lab here in the city to check for any clues that may link Corey to the disappearance of Charlotte Kinsey and Cinda Pallett. Authorities are also waiting for results from fingerprints taken from Corey's car today, but they seem to question whether anything will turn up.
Heavy rains of up to 18 inches have swollen the Red River. The river is almost 3 feet above a record high set in 1951. But the high water is slowly receding. At least 60 rural bridges have been washed out by pounding rains and rushing water.
There was so much rain in such a short period of time that this dam, located about 1 mile southwest of Madill, broke. The floodwaters just converged on this small town.
In Madill, the 126 residents of the Brookside nursing home who had to be evacuated because of rising water are back home now. The cleanup of Madill and other communities in southern Oklahoma continues. Homes, businesses, and roads were damaged.
As far as dollar limit, we have not assessed anything to my knowledge.
Anytime you have a matter of between 16 and 18 inches of rain in a 30-hour period, it does get a little wild and hairy.
In Oklahoma, no one was killed because of the storm. In Texas, however, there have been 4 fatalities. Ben McCain, Action 4, Lake Texoma.
Condemned inmates will spend their last 30 days inside this 12-by-8 cell. 2 guards will be stationed outside the door to screen visitors and to make sure the prisoner doesn't hurt himself. About an hour before the scheduled execution, a guard will bring a gurney to the cell. The inmate is securely strapped in, and then he's wheeled the final few feet to the execution chamber. Inside the chamber,
really can't look back.
Today, all the testimony in the Michael Newberry preliminary hearing came from OSBI agents. Newberry is being charged with killing 15-year-old Janella K. Garrett of Marshall. Her nude body was found last August 28th, a day after she was reported missing while babysitting. OSBI agent Forrest Smith testified he scraped a blood-like substance off the bumper of Newberry's pickup truck. That after Newberry was asked to come to OSBI headquarters so agents could examine the truck. Newberry's attorney, Bert Richard, argued that Newberry never gave permission to agents to remove anything from his truck and wanted the blood-like substance not to be admitted as evidence. Judge Merle Smith disagreed with Richard and will allow the material to be entered as evidence. Newberry was said to be at the home where the teenage girl was babysitting the night she was reported missing, and Newberry was there to install subscription television, according to earlier testimony. Several OSBI agents took the stand during the day to tell of what they have uncovered in the Garrett murder.
Most of the testimony today was technical, trying to link one piece of evidence to another. The prosecution is through calling witnesses to the stand. Tomorrow the defense will start, calling mostly people from the town of Marshall. It's expected to be another long day in court with more than a dozen people to be called to the witness stand. Ed Stewart, Action 4 at the Logan County Courthouse.
I went into the house with some apprehension. I found 35-year-old Gary Davidson in what appeared to be an intoxicated condition, depressed and talking of suicide. He was in the home of Charlie White, a man he had met in the Veterans Hospital. No weapons were in sight. Davidson told me he was at the end of his rope trying to get into a veterans program that would get him off drugs and alcohol, something he started during his days on a Navy River patrol boat in Vietnam, where he was wounded in the foot. Describe what kind of, let's say you walk in the VA center and tell them you need some drug and alcohol rehabilitation. What do they say?
Out the door.
I asked Gary if there was actually a bomb under the house.
There is a bomb under this house. I do not want to kill some kids across the street. Where is it at, Brad?
There isn't any bomb under the house, is there, Gary?
Tell the truth, Gary.
I'm not going to leave if there is or if there isn't.
Well, it don't make any difference. No, I was going to go down. I was going to blow myself up.
Gary said he was a drug addict, an alcoholic, and suffered from flashbacks. He feared being shot.
I'll walk out the door and be dead before I hit the street.
No, there's nobody out there. I'll walk out at first, okay? Me and Brad will, okay?
Charlie, I don't remember. I went in a flashback and I did go down and buy some black powder and some pipes.
Gary showed us a VA priority card, but said those with non-combat medical problems were getting priority over him. He said his addiction now is preventing him from keeping food in his stomach. What kind of drugs are you on that you need to be rehabilitated from?
I've been on speed. I've been on Tylenol 3s. Same thing. I've been on Valium. I've been on Valium since I come out of Nam in '67. And I just can't believe people's treatment that way.
During our conversation, police arrived, having been alerted by our cautious news director. We explained there was no hostage situation, no weapons in sight, and no bomb. Police escorted Davidson to the VA hospital, where we intended to try and get him admitted. However, VA security refused to allow us to enter with Davidson. Somebody coming out? Let's get her out now. He's not going in.
By 2 o'clock this afternoon, the mill was quiet, the horses were gone, and nothing but sugarless sugar canes remained. The recent rains put a damper on harvesting a full crop for sorghum makers at this year's festivities, but all was not lost. Almost 300 gallons of the sweet, sticky stuff will appear on dinner tables throughout the year. In close contest with the sorghum makers was the fried bread lady. Lucy Lena shows up every year to the delight of many and shares her secret in making the delicious delectables.
You get your flour, baking powder, and put your water in it, and you knead it till it's ready to, where you can cut them off. Not too soft, not too hard. You just put it in a hot grease and fry 'em.
Every year the celebration expands with more foods, a montage of arts and crafts, and of course hundreds of onlookers. It's a time for the people of Wewoka to pull together and grow together.
Let's come back next year. Out of cane, out of everything.
Carol Lambert, Action 4 in Wewoka.
Witnesses say the blaze broke out in the front bedroom of this home about 10:30 this morning. Firefighters contained the flames to just 2 rooms, but no one could get inside the house fast enough to save its lone occupant.
I was hollering for him and beating on the walls, and I couldn't hear nothing, so I went to the front door, and the boy was trying to get in there, trying to get the door open. and I kicked it a couple of times, and it came open, and smoke just barreled out. I couldn't go in at that time. And I could see flames. The flames in the other part of the house seemed to have died down, and I looked over in the living room, and I could see flames, and I could see him laying there.
He awoke at some point, tried to get out of the house. Apparently had recently had eye surgery, had a patch over one eye, so probably couldn't see very well, and was very hot and smoky anyway, and apparently at that time his clothing was on fire. In trying to get out of the house, he was disoriented and got as far as the living room kitchen area where he was found.
The victim has been identified as 24-year-old William Hensley. Hensley is the 21st fire fatality in Oklahoma City this year. As one fire official put it, that's far too many. Scott Wallace, Action 4, Southwest Oklahoma City.
Nationwide, the preliminary figures indicated that the average case where death had occurred could result in about up to a $13,000 overpayment. So if in fact all 62 of our cases really had been deceased and we followed the national trend, we'd have a potential overpayment somewhat in excess of $850,000 or $60,000.
What is the Social Security Administration doing to try to get that money back?
They have already had reimbursement on quite a bit of it already. They found, and many times when they've gone out and checked with the next of kin or someone and have indicated that we now have established death, this next of kin had said, well, yes, we knew that you'd probably be out sometime, and here are all the checks, and have simply reimbursed them. In a few cases, some of the checks have been cashed through error or other means, and they are securing reimbursement on those. In the very few cases where fraud is indicated, of course, those will be investigated thoroughly, and if fraud, in fact, it does seem to be the situation, then those will be turned over to the United States Attorney for possible prosecution.
Of bees, millions in fact, swarmed all over the southbound lane of I-35 north of Guthrie this morning. A South Dakota beekeeper on his way to Texas lost control of his truck after a car veered in front of him. A trailer carrying 180 colonies of honeybees overturned into a ditch. The protective netting around the trailer was torn loose, setting 11 million bees free.
Well, it looks like about 3/4 of a day work. I wish we could get down the line and get these unloaded. These bees in the truck we're wanting to get out. We're going to try and destroy these bees by cyanogas or whatever method they can get. They're having a little trouble locating some cyanogas. That's what we use up in South Dakota to destroy bees.
Unfortunately for the bees, the poison gas finally arrived from the State Department of Agriculture in Stillwater. A huge sheet of plastic was placed over the swarming bees, and an ethyl bromide poisonous gas was pumped in. The owner of the bees was stung with a $20,000 loss. Mark O'Neill, Action 4, north of Guthrie.
Well, basically, we want to know if this firing act of the city manager was detrimental to the city, or did it help the city some way? We can't see how it did. How you could fire an entire department and hire a new department and consider that efficient management. Now, I think most any businessman would have fired 2 or 3 men, got two or three new ones and trained them, and kept the business flowing steadily. But he didn't. He fired the entire force, and he called out people from the street department, from every other department. They were down on personnel, put them on the garbage trucks. And it seems like that several things in this deal were simply poor management.
Do you feel that the taxpayers' money is being wasted?
Absolutely. And I would like for them to prove that it isn't.
Listen. He said if he sees one police officer comes up here, he'll shoot the hostage.
Oklahoma City police work is dangerous and sometimes frustrating. Police are oftentimes put into situations that require quick and accurate judgment.
Which car? We haven't patted him down yet. Take him down.
It may become life and death, and the ultimate person responsible is the officer involved. Such is the case of Officer John Clark. He was charged and tried for the beating death of Clyde Edwards. The Oklahoma City man died shortly after being arrested last year in March. Witnesses say they saw Clark beat Edwards to death with a flashlight. But it took less than 30 minutes for a jury to find Clark innocent of the crime. And now the FOP thinks the city should pick up the legal costs. But the city disagrees.
They train us, they supervise us, and they dispatch us to the scene. If some action happens or something goes wrong, then they immediately back away from us, no longer acquainted with us.
This report comes from Oklahoma City officials recommending denial for the request from the FOP. Ray Clark contends that since the officer was found innocent in court, the city should stand by its employees and pay the legal costs. But according to this report, the city says innocent or guilty, it does not represent city employees in criminal cases, only civil. And just how did a legal bill amount to more than $54,000? Well, for the services of attorney D.C. Thomas alone, he charged $40,100. Then there was work done by a private investigator. He handed in a bill of $7,500. With other expenses, we soon add up to the grand total of $54,018.13. The city attorney is holding firm to the position of not paying for legal costs and criminal actions, and plans to show the written law in district court if necessary. City leaders expected the FOP to fight their decision, and whoever loses is expected to appeal. Ed Stewart, Action 4.
Well, I'm hoping that if the person or persons involved in taking the girls, or perhaps someone that knows the man or woman, might see the letter and realize what they're putting us through, and will, maybe even call the police or something anonymously, let somebody know somehow that the girls are all right and where they're located.
Two flight crews from the Royal Saudi Air Force will be trained to use AWACS surveillance planes here, Tinker Air Force Base, Oklahoma. An Air Force source says as many as 30 Saudis will begin their training in 1984 and be set to return to their country by 1985 when the first AWACS plane is delivered. Those two crews will then help train 6 other Saudi crews to keep the big planes rolling. And by 1990, Saudi Arabia will have 8 AWACS crews, a total of about 120 men. While in Oklahoma, the Saudis will be trained to use AWACS computers, radar, and scopes. The training done by Tinker personnel as well as instructors from IBM, Westinghouse, and Boeing. Air Force spokesman will not comment on camera, saying the Saudi training plans are only preliminary and subject to change. However, the Defense Department confirms the Saudi airmen will be trained at Tinker unless some snag develops in the AWACS sale. Barring any problem, though, 30 Saudi Arabians are scheduled to begin AWACS school Oklahoma style in about 3 years. Larry Otis, Action 4, Tinker Field.
This tiger, being used in conjunction with a publicity campaign, mauled 2-year-old Shauna Hill yesterday afternoon in downtown Oklahoma City. The girl went through a delicate operation last night and is expected to require further plastic surgery later. Oklahoma City Zoo Director Lawrence Curtis would like the state to have stronger restrictions on the handling of exotic animals.
It may not exactly prevent what happened today, but it would certainly go a long way towards reducing the problem of private ownership, irresponsible private ownership of exotic animals. It's just like carrying a gun. That 1-year-old tiger is potentially a dangerous animal, but it's its nature to be dangerous. You can't blame the cat.
And he may be right, but local resident Bill Phipps has 2 lion cubs in his backyard and considers himself a responsible owner. Though neighbors have different opinions on his cats, they are nevertheless aware of their presence.
Everyone's going to know he's there, and they will be warned in advance. So if they happen to get injured, it will be because they are where they don't belong, when they don't belong there.
So Oklahomans will just have to wait and see if restrictions are imposed on responsible and irresponsible owners alike. Spencer Briggs, Action 4.
The recent rains have wreaked havoc across the southeast portions of the state. For the time being, people forgot about the droughts that have plagued the state for the last 2 summers. All across Oklahoma, towns were rationing water. Part of the problem was the lack of rain. Part of it was poor distribution of the water on hand. The rains and the changes in season have calmed some town officials, but the situation has not resolved.
I think that during the winter months we try to play catch-up with the rest of the year and also into the spring and trying to get our lakes full on a statewide basis to get ready for the summer impacts. If we do have another drought situation next summer, even if it's a very short drought, anywhere from 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, we've seen that communities are very sensitive to that type of situation, not so much from a supply side, but more from a distribution side.
Moore, Oklahoma has a lot in common with other cities its size. For one thing, its history of water shortages. But the citizens voted in a new sales tax to help fund the expansion of the city's holding and pumping facilities. That's a step that would help any community.
But Moore has a broader tax base than a lot of cities. What works here probably would not work in southeastern Oklahoma. So a lot of people feel it's going to have to be up to the state to fund or at least assist with a lot of community water programs. The state legislature is scheduled to consider such aid in the next legislative session. But until that happens, some areas of the state are going to have to rely on the elements. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4, in Moore.
Whenever a large group of young people gather in downtown hotels and convention centers, you can pretty well guess that they'll discuss the future. That's especially true when the group is the Future Business Leaders of America and their collegiate counterpart, Phi Beta Lambda. There were 1,100 of them at the Sheraton Century Center this weekend, putting to practical use what they've learned in school.
Much of what we learn in school is simply theory. In FBLA, we give them a chance to compete in events, and on top of that, they get to run for campaign, election, and they get to try out some of these skills they've always learned in school, and they get to apply them. And that's why we're so important, is because we give them an avenue to channel those things they've learned.
The convention was a 9-state regional one. Now the students will go back home and back to classes to learn a little more theory. But the Future Business Leaders of America feel that experiences like this weekend are what will make their transition into the real business world a smooth one. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4.
An original Frederick Remington bronze, cast in 1902, now safely resting in Oklahoma City's Cowboy Hall of Fame. The Buffalo signal is valued at $1.5 million. The Hall of Fame has 12 of 22 Remington bronzes, including the popular Coming Through the Rye. Value of this statue, $500,000. Remington made several copies of all but one of his statues. But apparently he didn't make enough to meet the demand for these rustic frontier bronzes. Because of their high dollar value, hucksters are flooding the art market with forgeries, bogus Remington statues.
There are a lot of fake bronzes, Remington bronzes. Small foundries, collectors have them cast, art dealers, hucksters and peddlers. It's, you know, it's a form of graft, misrepresentation. The motive is always to make money, and the more scarce an object becomes, why the greater the demand for copy.
Demand for the statues is extremely high. To anyone who has enough money to buy a Remington bronze, the advice is to check with an expert first. As Remington himself wrote in 1902, that will protect you from the pirates of the trades of reproduction. Larry Ottis, Action 4 Cowboy Hall of Fame.